Member Fletcher.
Thank you. Just so I understand it, the $260 million that you started at was for a system for 4 counties. Is that correct? And then the reason we're now at 1.3 is because you've gone to the whole state?
Well, again, as Mr. Vickery indicated, that was a figure. It was a smaller project. It was focused on those Southern California counties, but it was also a development cost. Deployment is going to be our largest cost.
But it's pointless to develop it if you don't deploy it. So
No.
what was the total cost for an actual functional system? I mean, developing it's great, but if it's not in use, what's the point? Right. So when it started, what was the cost estimate?
I don't have the cost of deployment at that point.
Well, to be candid, when the direction was given to do this, because we didn't have an opportunity to prepare budget change proposals and to have this normal thing you would do on a project like this. So the decision was made to give us a direction, and so at the time we noted, both with finance and others, that there was no budget on deployment, and the expectation again was that the courts ought to bear that cost of figuring out how to deploy in the process. So all the discussion that took place initially was what do people think the cost is going to be to try to develop a statewide system. At that point in the preceding years with the courts, they had attempted a variety of approaches, from providing grants to courts to develop their own systems based on meeting some statewide standards, then having them try to work in regional groups, and then trying to have them work in groups with a common vendor that hadn't worked. And I think that was the concern that led Governor Davis to say, you know, we need to have one statewide system so that we have complete criminal history files and other things, but also that led to the direction of do it and then you just figure out how internally to fund it based on money that's available from year to year.
So what you're saying is by the time we get to the end, it won't just be the $1.3 billion. There was a lot of money that was spent before this on a whole bunch of other efforts that didn't work?
Well, so the money spent earlier, the courts have been, you know, back into the 90s and the 80s spending money on technology, and when state funding took place, many of them had contracts with independent vendors. There were 100 and, in effect, 70 different case type systems out there. And the agreement that was reached with the 10 courts in Southern California was that people would try to maintain their status quo but not spend new money on developing new systems, and that they would wait and cooperate with the courts that were taking the lead effort in the development activities in the process.
Because it's hard for me to be sympathetic to your budget concerns when we have a program that started at $260 million that's now at $1.3 billion, given that the program's changed. But, you know, during that same time frame, I don't know too many other areas of state government that have had that much of an explosion. And I get it's a different system, but we would perhaps have more money for judges, say like maybe $1 billion if some of the initial estimates had been met. Yeah. And I think a number of us support utilizing technology in a better system, but we certainly need to do it in a way that's cost efficient, that we can go back to our constituents and say the money is being spent wisely. And on that topic, I have a specific question related to something you just said, which is if a $1.3 billion computer system doesn't create efficiency, then why are we doing it? So if it doesn't reduce the number of people that are needed to run a system, so how many people with a $1.3 billion computer system, how many fewer employees will we need? What is the efficiency found? Because what I heard earlier was essentially none.
So what I said is not that there is no efficiency, that there will be, I think, significant efficiency. I think in Orange County, their reported figure was approximately 200 FTEs in that county. What I said is you, as a legislature, hopefully add judges in the future, then those positions could be redeployed rather than appropriating funding for new positions.
So on the $1.3 billion system, when fully implemented, how many people will that save statewide?
I don't know that. So
we're building a system and we're not sure what the impact will have. I mean, how do we show the return on investment? How do we show the efficiency? You don't know at all? Can you guess?
I'm not going to venture a guess on the number of FTEs here. That's part of the project we're working with the CIO on in terms of how to calculate the benefit analysis throughout, as well as the effectiveness or the qualitative things like complete criminal history files. And
It would just seem like you would do that before. Before you would ask legislators to give you $1.3 billion, you would be able to say the reason we want $1.3 billion is because it's going to save this much money because we'll need this many fewer positions and we'll be this much more efficient. And it seems like you would kind of do that at the beginning as opposed to the end.
Well,
but am I wrong on that?
But remember, at the beginning,
We were at 260 million.
no, at the beginning, we were given direction to develop a system, and there was not an appropriation made. And so the issues of deployment costs and all those things are things that we raised both in committee hearings at the time and with Department of Finance and over the years about working to set up a reasonable budget and the things that you're talking about.
So during the 8-year process, since this started at 260 until today where we are at 1.3, given that it's changed, during that 8-year process, we still haven't estimated the savings from the system or the efficiencies from the
To
system?
the first part of your question, though, the only estimate initially was on the development costs, so it's not that the
Right, because we didn't count
numbers,
the actual implementation of using it.
because the expectation was that the courts would be doing that.
But the 1.3 includes
All of that.
all of that. So now that we have all of it and we know it's going to go out there, we still don't know what the impact's going to be?
In terms of the total dollar savings, that's correct. That's the,
At what point do you think on our way to spending $1.3 billion, we'll actually be able to tell people how much it'll save?
well, the goal is that by the time you come back into session, before you begin the review of deployment schedules and deal with those issues, that you will have all of that.
So in January, when we come back?
Correct.
So in January, when we come back, you think, because it's up to slightly more than half of my district, but I hope to be here in January. And look forward to that. Final question,
We hope so,
Mr. Chair.
too, just 'cause
I'm
we
sure
don't
you
want a
do.
changing cast.
Final question, Mr. Chair, and I'll be quick. 1.3 billion is an absolute hard cap. No way you're going over it. If you hit 1.3 and it's not done, you're going to walk away from it, or you're going to come back and say, well, now it's 1.6 or 1.8 or 2.9 or pick a number.
That's the
Because you
cap.
said you support the cap. 1.3 is it.
That's the cap, and we, again, have our project review board process with all of our projects priced out and what the caps are with a limited amount of money, and that's our cap.
1.3.
And hopefully, as Mr. Farley says, we'll save some of that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Buchanan.